Welcome back to CRG, where this week we're going to take a look at the Amiga 500 Plus. So I bought this machine probably about a year ago now, with the intention of turning it into a vampire rig. I did apply for my Vampire V2 to put in this 500, and they did send me an offer, but it was just after Christmas, and to be honest, at the last minute I chickened out. So this little 500 Plus has been sitting on the shelf since then, feeling rather sorry for itself, somewhat unloved. It does work, as you can see, powers up okay, but the drive light is stuck on, and that's because the floppy drive is dead. It's currently not connected in there, that's why the drive light is on. Actually, when I bought this 500, it was listed on eBay as spares or repairs, not turning on. I took a gamble on it for £35. You will honestly not believe the reason why it wasn't turning on. I'll show you that when we get it apart. It needs a really good clean, so we'll do that today. It's missing a couple of feet, so we can fit those. And since that floppy drive's dead, what I thought we'd do is install a Gotek. But just to make things slightly different, I picked up one of these. This fake looking disc thing mounts in here, something like that. It has a cutout in it for an OLED display. We'll be mounting a couple of buttons on this underneath. And there's even space to mount our USB pen. This basically becomes our interface to the Gotek. Saves having to cut any holes in our nice A500 Plus case. As I'm sure you know, this machine also only has 1 megabyte of chip RAM on it. So we have a 2 megabyte chip RAM expansion. We'll get that in there as well. And that's all we're going to be doing to this little machine. No accelerators, no hard drive expansions. I don't want anything like that on this A500 Plus. I have my Amiga 1200s and CD32 with their accelerators and their hard drives in them. This little machine I just want for floppies. Well, for floppy emulation anyway. So let's get it tore down and let's get started. So getting into this machine is fairly straightforward. Just 3 screws along the front and 3 at the back. And then since we're going to be removing the floppy drive, we need to take out these 2 screws as well. Our machine is serial number 001559. Is that a low serial number? Probably not. Right, so all being well, this should just lift off. There we are. And the floppy drive should just lift out. And finally get my disk back. One unfortunately dead floppy drive. We'll maybe take a look at that in a future video. But for now, it's redundant. So plan A is that this Gotek will go in here somewhere. And then this thing mounts in here. I will need to get the instructions out to see exactly where this mounts. I don't see it mounting in just as far as that. I guess I would say it mounts like that. But we have the instructions, so we can refer to those later. I did say I would tell you why this machine was not working. And for whatever reason, the CPU was out of its socket. Now, I really don't think that chip could have got out of there by itself. But when this thing arrived, the CPU was lying over here somewhere. All I did was put that back in, powered it up, and away it went. No problem. You'll also notice the battery has been removed from here. If you own an A500 Plus with the original battery still there, pause this video, take your machine apart right now and remove that battery. I was lucky in that the one here had not leaked. There's no corrosion whatsoever, but I have seen plenty of 500 pluses out there that have been more or less destroyed from a leaky Varta battery. So as you can see, even the board is really nice and clean. There's not a whole lot to do to this machine. The case, yes, does need a bit of a clean. The keyboard is filthy. So I'm going to do all that. It probably would be candidate for a retro brighting, but to be honest with you, I'm not that keen on doing that. As I've said so before, the yellowing is very consistent across the case. It's not like that VIC-20 that I did retro brighten, which had very patchy yellowing on it. This is nice and smooth across the case, so I'm happy enough just to leave it as it is. So I was just about to start cleaning this case out, and I noticed there actually is a little bit of corrosion has developed here over the last year or so. So that battery that I thought hadn't leaked obviously must have leaked to some extent, and it's caused a little bit of corrosion just on these resistors here and down around here as well. Now it does look just to be superficial. It doesn't seem to have ate into the board at all. It just seems to have stained the legs of these and a couple of these wee pads here. So I'm just going to use this soft wire brush pen here just to try and clean that up a wee bit. Okay, that looks a bit better now. The legs of this little capacitor here are still a wee bit dull. I suppose we could remove it, actually replace that component, but I think it was just superficial corrosion just on the exposed metal here. As I say, there's no sign of damage on the board itself whatsoever. So we'll just leave well enough alone for now. Once we get all the various bits and pieces installed in this machine, we can give it a thorough testing out and shoot it through any problems whatsoever. We'll come back to this point here and have a closer look. So I'm just in the middle of cleaning this thing, just using this all-purpose degreaser. I find this does a pretty good job of cleaning up old plastics. And I was thinking to myself, has this actually yellowed? You see, the inside of the case you would expect to be the original colour, and that top there is not a million miles off the inside of that bottom. Sure it's not. So is the A500 Plus actually more a beigey colour rather than the white of the likes of the 1200s? Please do let me know in the comment section below while I continue to clean this thing. So while we're waiting for the case to dry after its little bath, I thought we'd turn our attention to the Gotek. This is the KMTech board. We've got a bit of work to do here. Along here we need to fit these little pin headers, something like that. We need to get a USB socket to put on there. Now, one thing in the instructions is it recommends to take a USB cable, cut one end off, connect it on there, and then just plug it in here. But I need a USB socket for here, so I'm going to recover this one off the Gotek to put on there. And then what we'll do is just use more of these little pin headers in here and in here, and we'll just run a wire from A to B. We need buttons on this extension board, something like that. They'll go on there, and the OLED goes in here. Now unfortunately the only little screens I could find all have a blue PCB. I did try and find one with a green board on it just to try and match this, but well, whatever. So that goes in there, something like that. And that is supposed to line up with those holes, but it doesn't. So I'll have to get a little bit creative there, but should not be beyond us. I also need to modify this slightly. I need to take the 2 buttons off and the 2 LEDs off. The instructions talk about just running wires from here across to connect on, but since we've got all these little pin headers, I'm just going to put some of them in here as well. Then we can just use these wires to connect everything up. And through the magic of video editing, we have one completed Gotek for Amiga floppy extender thing. So there's our little OLED screen installed. This was incredibly tricky to get in here because the holes just did not line up whatsoever. So I wound up just bending the pins that were there, just bent them round, cut them off short, filled those holes with solder, and then just tacked the pins onto the back of it. They're well on there, so hopefully it'll work okay. There's our USB socket that came off this. That was through hole. This is surface mount, so I just bent the legs out and whatnot and tacked them on. It's well on there. Our little buttons, the only possible comment I would have here is that the pads for them maybe could have been 1 or 2 millimeters closer together. I mean, they're not going anywhere, and I might just put a little blob of super glue on one side of these just to make sure they're well on there, but the ends of those legs are just touching those pads where they're soldered on. Definitely steady, but I would be concerned through a lot of use they might crack. Right, I think we should test it. I have updated the firmware on this to the latest flash floppy version that will hopefully drive our little OLED screen. Yeah, we have the Amiga set up here bare bones. I have a lot of wires to connect up. Let me do all that and then we'll test it. Okay, everything is hooked up. I have a USB pen stuck in here with the configuration file and the auto boot file, and I've stuck a few demo ADFs on there as well. Let's see what happens. That's looking good. Just loading auto boot. That is the floppy access light. That's just power. Everything is looking good. So we'll go with Enigma. Stick that in there. F10 to save and reboot. And there we are, yep. It's booting here nicely. And the wee screen tells us we're loading Enigma. Pretty cool that it tells you the track that it's reading. So before we put this machine back together, I thought what we'd do is take a quick look at this memory expansion, install it, and just make sure it's working correctly. So this is a 2 megabyte memory expansion for the Amiga 500 or 500 Plus. That's 2 megabytes as in there is 2 megabytes on this card. The A500 Plus, just stock like this, has 1 megabyte of chip RAM. In Workbench here, you can see that we have just over 800k free. Obviously it's less than 1 megabyte because Workbench is loaded, it takes its share. Now if we install this thing just like this, we will get 1 of those 2 megabytes, bringing us up to a total of 2 meg chip RAM. there we are. This time you can see we have just over 1.8 megabytes free. Again, Workbench is taking its share out of the total 2 megabytes. But as I said, this expansion has 2 megabytes of memory on it. So what do we need to do to get that other 1 meg seen by the Amiga? Well, the kit comes with this little adapter that goes in place of Gary here. Well, sits underneath Gary. Plus we need to do a little modification. There's one trace we have to cut down here, and we need to solder a couple of wires from this across to here. So let's do that, and that should hopefully give us 2 megabytes of chip RAM and 1 megabyte of slow RAM. So to get access to this other 1 megabyte, what we need to do is cut this trace here at the bottom that runs between U32 and U35. Not this thick trace here, which has the U32 rating on it. It's the thin one just slightly above it. So just to confirm that we have successfully cut that trace, we have the multimeter out here in continuity. And I probably should have tested this before cutting, but what that trace does effectively is make a connection between pin 2 of U34 and pin 2 of U32. And as you can see, there is now, or as you can hopefully hear, there is no continuity there. In fact, I wonder, can I pick up a bit of the exposed copper here? Yeah. And then likewise there, yep. But between the two, nothing. That's what we want. Right. Let's get our wires on. So the kit comes with one large wire to go between the board and the Gary adapter. We'll worry about that in a minute. And then it comes with these 2 separate wires. The shorter of the 2 we need to take from the near side pin and make that off onto pin 2 of U32. And then the longer goes from the far side pin and that needs connected to pin 2 of U34. I'll do that and then we'll be back. Okay, that is our wires connected up as we need. Just where that wee bit of copper has been exposed there, just for the sake of completeness. One little touch of green nail varnish. Right, just a matter of getting this cable installed now. So the pins on this are labelled 1 through 8, and likewise up here labelled 1 through 8. So it does go on with a twist. Let's boot back into Workbench and let's see if we now have our 2 megabytes of chip RAM and our 1 megabyte of slow. Oh yes, it has worked. So there is our full 2 megabytes of graphics memory or chip memory, and we have just shy of 900k now of other memory. So Workbench is using a little bit of our graphics memory and a little bit of our other slow memory. The little modification has worked. Right, well that is pretty much everything I'm going to do to this A500 Plus. Time just to put it all back together. So the bottom of this case then, if you remember, was rocking. I have just removed the 2 original feet that were on it. I don't have any other feet to match these, but I do have these little clear things here. So we'll stick these on instead. Those will work nicely, even if they're not original. If anyone wants 2 original A500 feet, let me know. So our board then sits in here. Now, fitting this thing in how am I going to do this? See, to be honest with you, I have no idea what this attaches to. There actually isn't anything in the instructions about where to mount that, and you would have thought that these 4 holes were to line up with something. The position of the opening for the floppy on the side of the case, sort of about that position there. So I need to mount that like there, but you know, there's nothing to mount it to. There is that one post there. Wonder could we do something with it. And then I'm going to have to come up with something to hold this side. Right, I need to have a wee think about this. So I'll just continue putting this together, and then hopefully I'll be able to show you what I've come up with. Well, that's everything in, albeit I'm not entirely pleased with it. I think what I'll have to do is go away and get some of those wee plastic standoffs you might see on old IBM motherboards, just to try and mount this stuff better. So I just have this sort of floating here. It's actually 2 of those bigger feet that I have glued together, and then a little bit of double-sided sticky tape just to hold that up off the board. Equally, to hold this in place, another 2 of those feet stuck together, and a lot more double-sided sticky tape. It's in place for now, but as I say, I'll have to get something better to hold it. Oh, and by the way, I noticed while doing all this, there's one resistor up here that's burnt. So you can see that resistor there that is burnt. No idea why that would have happened. The machine does seem to work okay. I would need to go away and check the schematics, but I think that is connected to the game port. So possibly someone's had a dodgy joypad or something in here and has fried that resistor. Not sure how that would have happened, but I'll have to get one and get that replaced. But in the meantime, let's get this keyboard in. Let's get the lid closed. And that's this machine finished for today. Well, there we are. Our little Commodore Amiga 500 Plus is finished. Well, for today anyway. We have the Gotek installed with this little OLED display and blinky LED lights. We have our memory expansion installed, giving us the 2 megabytes of chip RAM and the 1 megabyte of slow. So the only other things really to do to this machine, first of all, I need to figure out why that resistor up here has blown. It does seem to be connected to the game port, so my only assumption is that somebody has plugged in a non-compatible joypad or joystick at one point in the past and it's blew up that resistor. Hopefully that's all the damage it has done and it hasn't damaged anything else in there as well. Also need to come up with a better mounting method for this. I mean, it's pretty solid as it is, but I'm just not pleased with the way it's left inside. I think those wee plastic standoffs I had mentioned before probably will be the best way to do it. So I'll order up a couple of them along with that resistor. So the other thing that's definitely missing here is the noise from the floppy drive. You can get a little speaker modification for these Goteks. In fact, KMTech, who I got this extension board off, make one. So I'll maybe get that. That just adds back that nostalgic clicking sound from the drive. I think I need that in this machine. But that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this wee video. If you did, please give a thumbs up, as it does really help the channel. Helps with those YouTube algorithms. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.